Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paramindful. I'm one of your co-hosts, Melba Collins, and over there is Alex the Werewolf. Alex, how are you doing today?
I am living the dream.
Relatable. Is it
Yep,
a Freddy Krueger dream, per
very
se?
much so.
Also
Yes.
relatable. You're going to notice here that we're just down to two people right now. And unfortunately, we have had a lot of scheduling issues. As you can see, we've had a lot of EVPs coming up just because we've had a lot of scheduling problems. But you can still catch the sultry voice of the gold standard Carl Carafel on the Raw watch along happening on OLE every Monday, along with Chris Best and OMD. You can also catch him on Tuesdays with Turnbuckle Talks. That being said, we're going to get into our topic a little bit today. We're talking Bermuda Triangle, the creepy, crappy place that our good friend Astro Bizarro lives pretty close to. But first, we're going to talk about our fun sponsor, Rogue Energy Drink. They're designed to be the ultimate energy drink for you with zero sugar, zero fillers, 5 calories, and packed with essential vitamins and minerals. Yes, I'm reading off a script. I don't care. That's what I got to do in this podcasting
Very
world. It is
memorized.
loaded with brain enhancing nootropics, which is a new word for me. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to assume that they're good for you. Good
Oh,
taste, good blending. It's not a grainy texture from what I've had from it, which is something great that I require with an energy drink. Energy and protein and hydration, all available on Rogue Energy. There, you can use our promo code OLEPods to get 10% off. And we have a fun little video here that shows all of the fun flavors that they have available for you. I love that video. He's so bougie. Makes me
it's
feel fancy.
it feels very. I was gonna say metal, but not metal. It's like it's heavy. I like it.
It is. And again, you can get your Rogue Energy on rogueenergy.com. And if you use our promo code OLEPods, you get 10% off your first order there. Alex,
Yes,
the Bermuda Triangle.
the
We're
Bermuda
talking about that today.
Triangle.
What are your experiences in regards to the Bermuda Triangle, or what kind of drew you into the interest of the Bermuda Triangle?
Well, I've been to Florida one time in my whole entire life. I went to Clearwater, and that's not in the Bermuda Triangle.
No,
I did,
no.
however, see Hulk Hogan. He was riding a Vespa, like a scooter, when I was in Clearwater. So that was a sight to see. I have no way of proving that that happened, but
Well, hey, there's your little wrestling tidbit of information today. Fun
that's
fact.
right. Um, okay, so the first time I ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle was when I was like 6 or 7. I'd stumbled upon some Discovery Channel show or whatever it was, and they were talking about something called Flight 19. And Flight 19 was, um, it was like a squadron of five. I got it right here. 5 Grumman Avenger torpedo bombers, which Grumman, it doesn't matter. I know too much about airplanes and I won't bore you with it. But Grumman was a company, and then they like shipped it off to other companies to make the planes for them during the war. Anyways, so these torpedo bombers, they had 14 people aboard 5 planes. Um, yeah, they disappeared. They flew out on a mission. It was a training mission. I should clarify. And they disappeared. There was no sign of them ever again. There was no wreckage ever found. Nothing. Now, I don't know if you want me to go into like detail right away, or if you want to kind of ask questions.
Oh,
But I'm fully loaded for bear here with cool stuff.
Well, let's get into that real quick after, like, because with my experience with the Bermuda Triangle, I actually went to Bermuda
Okay.
when I was, I believe, about 9 years old. That kind of time of my life is a little fuzzy, obviously, because I was a child.
I
But
always
you know
whenever
the
you
movie The
say
Perfect
Bermuda,
Storm?
whenever you say Bermuda, I get the Beach Boys playing in my head. Sorry.
That's tremendous. But you are my movie kind of trivia guy. You know the movie The Perfect Storm with George Clooney?
Of course, yeah, yeah.
I happened to go to Bermuda when that storm was ravaging the East Coast.
Interesting.
Yeah, not
Interesting.
my parents have since gotten better at planning trips. But I unfortunately got trapped in Philadelphia for like 3 days with my dad with like only spring clothes. And it was like hailing and snowing.
You're Canadian, you can handle it.
I mean, we could handle that, but
Yeah,
like couldn't really like it
yeah,
was just not particularly pleasant when we
yeah.
got to Bermuda. So it wasn't what I would consider the
Yeah, that kind of
best
sucks, eh? It's
time.
kind of I'm not going to say it's a waste of a vacation, but it's kind of a waste of a vacation.
it it was certainly questionable, but I
But
did
it's
get
an experience,
introduced to the urban legend and myth of the Bermuda Triangle at this
right?
point, which, given the circumstances going down there, I definitely fed into my suspicion and paranoia of the area.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it
So
makes sense with like storms and stuff. That makes absolute sense as to why ships would go down and stuff. But there's a lot of weird stuff that
100%.
goes there. Yeah.
100%. After that point, I actually was able to, at this point, I was going to the library a lot and renting movies and videos and stuff. So I actually started renting videos on the Bermuda Triangle and like hearing about all these strange happenings and occurrences happening in this area, and immediately got terrified that I was brought to a place where I could have potentially died.
Fair
So
enough.
there's
Thanks, mom.
that.
Thanks, dad.
Yeah, thanks, mom and dad. Um, But yeah, let's talk about some of the strange happenings that are happening around there so that our viewers can kind of who don't know about the Bermuda Triangle maybe can get an understanding of the things that we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit more detail about this Flight 19 of yours, Alex.
All right, so I wrote a little bit of an essay instead of point form, so it's going to sound very scripted, and I apologize for that, but I'll try to make it sound not scripted.
Take us in.
Like I said, 5 torpedo bombers. Torpedo bombers are just planes that would have torpedoes on them, and they'd fly low enough and then drop a torpedo into the water, and that would strike a sub or a battleship or whatever, right? So this, from my research, kind of sparked the. It was kind of like the catalyst for everybody knowing what the Bermuda Triangle was, because it was huge, and it involved the military, and the military is usually very good at finding things. If they lose a ship or whatever, right? So
Yeah, they're good at finding things that should probably not be found.
yeah, yeah, aliens. Um, okay, so there was a flight leader. His name was Lieutenant Taylor, and he was um, like a professional. I shouldn't say professional. That sounds weird because they're all professionals technically. But for this type of plane, this type of torpedo bomber, he had logged over 2,500 flying hours. So that's not taxiing, that's flying hours. That's hours in the sky working these
Okay, so
planes.
we would say he's like an experienced veteran.
Very much so. Very much so. The remaining 13 people, so he was leading the squadron. He was basically teaching them. Um, it's something called Dead Reckoning. I'll get into that in just a second. Sounds gnarly, right? Sounds like a heavy. Actually, I think it's a Megadeth song. Sorry. So yes, the other people in this flight squadron, they had about 300 hours of flight time with this type of aircraft. So I don't think it could be. I mean, I guess it could be pilot error, but it's very difficult to have that many planes just disappear, right? Anyways, so what is not really well known about Flight 19 is that all of the clocks in every one of the planes had been removed. Why? Still don't know why. But they didn't question anything because all pilots should be wearing a wristwatch. and which plays into the dead reckoning. So let me move here. So dead reckoning is, it's like a means of, it's like you do computational math with your watch and the direction you're going, and you basically try to figure out exactly where you are without the use of charts or maps or there was no GPS at the time, but that kind of thing, right? So it takes into account time, airspeed, distance, and direction. Yeah. So it's solely by means of computations based on those things. There's nothing else. And the idea is, say you were flying to an island, say Melball Island, right? And you're like, okay, that island is, I actually wrote up an example here. So say you're cruising at, okay, so these airplanes cruised at a speed of 215 miles per hour, which for us Kanakistan people, 346 kilometers an hour. That was their cruising speed. They could go faster, but that was the cruising speed. Now, if they were using landmarks such as islands and stuff, and they were 600 miles away, for example, what would happen if they were off a certain amount of degrees? So instead of flying dead north at 0 degrees, say they were flying at, what did I use as an example here? Yeah, so say you were flying at 355 degrees, so just slightly northwest, just slightly. Over that distance, the problem with dead reckoning is that it's cumulative. So any sort of miscalculation is exponentially bigger and bigger and bigger. So instead of flying straight, you're flying just slightly off, and then you'd end up, where we got here, 52.3 miles or 84 kilometers east-southeast of the island you were looking for. It's just, it's bizarre. It's like if you were to draw a straight line from point A to point B, and then you take that straight line, you just kind of wiggle it a little bit, it's still going to be south and to the side. So you'd never find where you're going. And because of that, every other calculation gets messed up. So
what we're saying is that Melball would not be an efficient pilot because she sucks at math.
Because she can't tell time. No, it's
she really can't.
It's quite. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not easy, but the theory is sound. If you run out of everything, and you don't have GPS or whatever, charts, whatever, this is a sound tested method, but you have to be accurate. So, yeah. So you would end up being, what do we got here? Yeah, you'd end up being way off course. But anyways, so we take that into consideration is what I said. Did they screw up their calculations? We don't know. The problem is they were still being contacted by the base, the air base, because they were just off the coast of Florida. Now, the contact between the squadron and the airbase in Florida, they said, are you able to fly your way back? The report was, no, my compasses have failed. So I did some diving, some deep diving, and there are two types of compasses. Well, relative, there could be more, but there's two types that are specifically used in airplanes. And back then, there was something called a whiskey compass, which was a compass that was full of an alcohol-water mixture. And what that would do is not allow it to freeze. It would also allow it to, like, the perfect buoyancy, everything. So all these guys had these compasses. There were two per plane. All of them stopped working, which doesn't make sense to me, because I can get one, because with whiskey compasses, you had to fill up the alcohol and the water mixture if it were to evaporate or if there was a leak or whatever, right? Throw out half of those. That still leaves at least 5, I think, compasses that should work, but they didn't. So it's very, very interesting in my mind, because with compasses, they also have to be calibrated. So each one of these compasses were calibrated to, what do they call it here? Specific term. There's a deviation of up to 30 degrees depending on where you are on the planet for these compasses. These planes were in Florida and they were already compensated. So that means that there was a plus 7.98 degree on the on the compass, and they've accounted for that.
Hmm.
And they still all failed. So it's very bizarre. But
Mm-hmm.
there's no documentation that I could find of these pilots topping up these compasses, or anybody topping it up for that matter. But I find it hard to believe that at least 10, minimum of
Mm-hmm.
10 compasses all fucked up. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you like take into consideration like this isn't the only flight that's had
Yes.
something like this happen. There's the Star Tiger, the Star Ariel, the
Yeah.
Douglas DC-3
Yeah.
that have
This
just
this
all just poof
this was
out
just
of the air.
the first super famous one. And
Yeah.
I just find it like, yes, you could have calculations that are messed up, but would you have 5 airplanes that all disappeared? Like
Mhm.
I could get one airplane, you don't find the wreckage, MH370. Sorry, that was that Malaysia flight 370 that disappeared, and it's very bizarre.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's 5 planes. If they were to ditch into the ocean, you're going to find something, whether it's a whatever, a floating notebook at least. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
5 planes worth of junk, right? And they know roughly where they were going to be, right? So
Mhm.
they're inside this triangle. So I should also
Yeah,
keep
and
in
that
mind.
was the point that I was gonna make is like of all these planes that are major planes, some of them passenger planes, some of them, transport planes,
Mhm.
you would hypothetically find something. And especially in the Bermuda waters, like that water is very clear. And especially when you start to get close to those clusters of like little islands and stuff, the water doesn't tend to be terribly deep. And
Yeah.
even if it is, it's clear enough that you can see wreckage from the air, even at higher points in the water.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that these things just kind of disappear without a trace.
Hmm.
And with this one specifically, it says something that there's something wrong with the compasses.
Yeah. And
Um,
it was recorded. It wasn't just like,
mhm,
oh yeah, I heard him say that. It was recorded as him saying, I don't remember exactly verbatim what they said, but the base had messaged him, are you able to point yourself, I think it was point yourself to whatever degree it was and make it back home. He says, I can't. My compasses have failed. The interesting thing that I forgot to mention was during the investigation, the American military investigated,
mhm.
they had discovered that it was not the fault of the pilots, which I find very interesting, because they would have to come up with a solution. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there would have to be a question answered somewhere along the way for them
Right.
to figure
And
that out.
the way I look at it is like, okay, say the lieutenant, the main pilot, say his compasses fail. He radios to the plane right beside him, or they have manual signals as well. Back in the day, I don't know what they
Mhm,
do nowadays because they're flying fighter jets now. Anyways, somebody had to have a compass that was working, and you
mhm,
could
mhm.
contact each other between. So that to me is enough to say nobody's compasses were working. The interesting thing though is I sat around for a while trying to figure out like what could have happened. And I ended up down this like deep rabbit hole of geomagnetic storms. I don't know if you ever heard of that stuff, but it's I
I
don't know.
mean, let's segue into that part of the conversation because that's a whole different chunk of what we were going to talk here.
Yeah.
But before we kind of move into that, we also have to express it's not just planes that are
Yes. That's
disappearing,
fair.
and it's not just um, um, planes and like modern stuff that's been disappearing. There have been cases, from what I could see, that on again on Wikipedia, 1880 was
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
kind of time that I had heard recordings of things going missing in the Bermuda
Right.
Triangle. Many ships are having the same problems. I assume with the compass problem, or they're just ending up in this area and they're all disappearing.
And
You've
that's
got
the thing
the
is
HMS
there's
Atlanta, the USS Cyclops, the Carol A. Deering,
yes.
got the I don't even know how to say this word, Connemara 4, as well as the KC 135. Like there's just so
Yeah.
many cases, and again, it's the same situation where contact is lost or
And
they just disappear
that's the part that gets
and
me.
nothing is
That's
found.
that's the part that gets me is it's been around. Like it's people have known about the Bermuda Triangle for a long
Mhm.
time, but it became like this. I don't want to call it a worldwide phenomena thing, but it became famous because of Flight 19.
Yeah,
There was
well, and
people
especially when the military get involved.
right, and there's like military ships that have disappeared,
Yeah.
and like cruise ship. I shouldn't say cruise ships because cruise ships, when you say it, it's like, oh, 3,000 people went missing. It wasn't that
Mhm.
kind of thing, but I find it interesting that there's only one contact. You know what I mean? Like, oh, my compasses aren't working. Nobody's compasses are working, but then
Mm.
everybody else just seems to just vanish.
Mhm, mhm.
It's kind of cool.
There's
Well, not
also
cool.
like in those videos that I had mentioned that I was watching when I was very young, they were like reenactment videos of
Right,
people on like 747s just
right.
flying around there, and they happened to be in the triangle, and whirlpools were opening up
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and they didn't disappear miraculously. But it's like, how many of those things are really happening? How many things are maybe, explainable? So let's
Right.
talk about these geostorms that you were just talking about, because that
Yeah.
was not something that came up on my list.
No, geomagnetic storms. I
Geomagnetic
just want to
storm.
mention one more. There was a guy who was flying a Cessna from one island to Florida, like to like mainland Florida, I should say.
Okay.
He had made it like he was flying, and this is like his account. So I mean, you take it with a grain of salt, obviously. He said that the clouds around his plane started acting funny and swirling, and then he couldn't see anything. And then it was like he said there was like flashing lights in the clouds, not like light bulbs or anything, but like almost like lightning or electricity.
Mm.
He ended up making the flight that would normally have taken him, say, whatever, 5 hours or whatever it was. He made it there, I think it was like 2 hours earlier than he should have, or than he
Oh.
could have, which I find very funny, very strange. But like
Mhm.
he doesn't know how it happened. Nobody has any idea how it happens.
Hmm.
He had the time he took off, and it's documented. He has the documented time when he landed in Florida, and it was too short of a time for him to have made it because the plane didn't fly that fast.
I
So,
mean, with the time thing, I don't I can't offer an explanation
right.
for that, but the
Yeah.
swirling winds and the lightning almost does sound a bit like a water spout, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know what like how high
Is
this
that what that's called, like a tornado on the water?
yeah, but I don't know how fast he was flying. I don't know like or how high he was
Yeah.
flying, I should say. But like all the math that was done, like there's no possible way he could have made it here by then. And he's
Hmm.
like, what the hell just happened, right? So I think that's
Interesting.
kind of cool. So I'm thinking maybe like some sort of vortex or something. I don't know. But yes, geomagnetic storms.
Mhm.
Geomagnetic storms is like a huge disturbance of the Earth's magnetosphere or magnetosphere, whatever you want to pronounce it if you're British or whatever.
Okay.
But it happens when there's a coronal mass ejection from the sun. So the sun, if you ever see videos of it kind of like exploding, right?
Mhm, mhm.
That sends out radiation, and if it's aimed towards Earth, it can fry all our electronics and stuff like that. However, what happens is if they're directed towards Earth, like roughly around Earth, it changes the magnetic, um, I guess, makeup, I suppose,
Oh,
of
okay,
our
so it has an
magnetosphere.
effect on that, okay.
Yeah, so that's the only thing that I could wrap my brain around as to why a compass would fail because there's
Mhm.
nothing electric in those
Interesting.
compasses. There's nothing electric. There's like a little bulb that's about it to light it up.
Mhm,
There's
mhm.
nothing else. So it's not like, oh, the whatever, the microchip fried and then it's just
Mhm,
it always
mhm.
points north or wherever. And yeah, so I'm thinking maybe that's what happened because with a geomagnetic storm, the compass
Mhm.
would just start spinning and spinning and spinning because it's trying to find something and it's finding magnetic forces everywhere. So
Mhm.
yeah, so
It's
that's
interesting though that it just seems to happen in this isolated
yeah,
area. I
right.
mean, what do we think could be the cause of that?
Well,
specifically? Because I had a list of stuff.
I'm I'm of the opinion that there's more than one. Well, obviously, we know there's more than one triangle on the planet. I
Mhm.
think I made an EVP about one. I think
Yes, the Alaskan one, yeah.
that's right. Um, but I think there's probably more than one in the ocean somewhere, and we just kind of don't stumble upon it because it's not through regular flight paths or whatever, shipping channels or
I
whatever.
mean, arguably the Pacific Ring.
Sure. I have no idea what that is. I should probably Google it. Um, I think though, like I don't have an answer. Obviously, if I had an answer, I'd probably be completely loaded and rich. But it's just strange how weird things happen in weird places because it's such a bizarre
Mhm,
place. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a triangle. Like
mhm.
there could be 48 points in between, and it could be a whatever a 48 sided stop sign would be called. I don't know what that would be, but it could be the Bermuda Octagon for all we know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It
just
just seems to happen in that kind of
right, and
triangulated area based
they
on
use
instances.
three points, right? And it's easier to
Yeah, yeah.
list an island than it would be some random point in the ocean. So,
Yeah, I mean,
oh, I
for
should also clarify. I believe it's from Florida to Bermuda, and then from Bermuda to I want to say Cuba, and then from
Puerto
Cuba
Rico,
is it Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico, thank you. And then from Puerto
Astrid will
Rico
be
back.
disappointed in you, sir.
Hey man, I mentioned Florida. That's all I had. So
Yeah, according to what I saw, it was from Miami, specifically Miami,
yes,
Florida.
yeah,
Yeah, and then to Bermuda and then Puerto Rico.
yeah.
Um, Now, there's been a lot of people, speculating about stuff in the ocean,
Right,
obviously, and there we have to touch on this a little bit. A lot of people think that it could be remnants of an old ancient city, specifically Atlantis.
right,
I've heard thoughts that people think that it could be that the magnetic thing is caused by the old technology that the ancient Atlanteans kind of had and used because they were, thought to be such farther advanced
right,
kind of group of people. Do you
right.
think that there's probability to that?
I do. Um, I don't know how far I want to go into this one because like it could end up being another rabbit hole.
We will do Atlantis in its own
Right. Um,
episode, so just give away what you don't wanna give
so
away there.
no, that's totally fine. So there's a place called Bimini, right?
Mhm,
Which is down in the Florida Keys or whatever the hell it is.
mhm, mhm.
Edgar Casey, a very famous medium, thank you, um, predicted a whole bunch of crazy things, most of which came true. Um, he also predicted that the edge of Atlantis would be found in either 1968 or 1969 off the coast of Bimini. And in I think it was 1968, whatever, one of those years, they found a road that went from Bimini basically into the ocean and then disappeared. So that's credence enough for me to know that there's something there, but I don't know if it's Atlantis. But I mean, that would make a lot of sense if they were super advanced. You know, there's the it's limitless. It could be anything.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
could be aliens firing rockets for all we know, right? We don't know, you know.
I mean, they
But
need their own kind of Bikini Island too, where they need to
right,
test out their weaponry and stuff. Maybe
I
Bermuda
think
Triangle was a former testing spot, and this is the results,
yeah, I
lingering
think
results of that
I
test.
think the Atlantis thing is a great theory.
Mhm,
There's also talks about like off the coast of Florida there being a UFO underwater base. Maybe that's
mhm.
something, you know. So
Yeah, that's true, that's
I
true.
really have no answer. So kind of weird.
I mean, with Atlantis, it's another one, as I said, we'll have to do a whole thing on that independently because there's just so much lore and
Right,
fascination and ideology behind where it is or where it
right,
potentially was based
right.
on
because they
on
did.
this, so we can get into that at a later thing.
Yeah.
I I think that there's certainly something suspicious going on. I'm just trying to figure out if I feel like it is a lingering thing from Atlantis, or if it's potentially just a weirdly natural occurrence happening because of plate movement and this
Or whatever.
solar kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
I
But
think.
it just seems so oddly suspicious that it's in such a concentrated area when, hypothetically speaking, like, I know our planet is like made of different materials in different
Right.
spots, but like, what about that specific
Right.
small spot? Which would, like, if you look at like us as like Jupiter, it'd be like the sun, that big
Right.
storm that's always on Jupiter with
Which
that
is
one focal
bizarre.
point.
Yeah, and it's like what octagonal or whatever that storm is, or
Sure,
that's
yeah, it's like,
yeah.
but, like, what about our planet is making
Yeah.
it like, is there a certain type of material that maybe just happened to be under there and now is causing, maybe it's a highly magnetic thing that we haven't investigated yet,
Right.
because there doesn't seem to be, I could be wrong about this, but there doesn't seem to be, from what I see, as much wildlife in those kind of waters. Do you get what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, there's not as much
I've
coral
never
stuff,
yeah,
fish.
I've never been there, to be honest, so I have no say in that. But
But even from, like, the videos that I've seen of them in
right,
that area when they have found certain wreckage and
right.
things, it
What
doesn't seem like there's a lot of, like, I would expect to see growth of,
right,
like, some kind of something,
right. Like
and
coral
there's
or whatever?
just, like, if something went down in the '50s, I expect it to be pretty rusted and, like, have a lot of, like, almost its own ecosystem, and they don't. There's barely anything on it.
Right.
So it's like, is there something about that area that's making it not livable? Maybe, and maybe repelling things. Maybe is that a self-defense thing? Again, is it a natural thing,
Yeah.
or is it an Atlantis going, "Get the heck out of our area"?
I s- I tend to lean towards a geomagnetic storm. However,
Mm,
I also tend to believe that there are places on Earth that are just weird, whether it's Hoyabashu, which we've covered,
yeah,
or
yeah,
Aokigahara Forest in Japan,
yeah,
or the Alaskan Triangle. I just think that there's places where crazy shit happens
mhm,
because energy is somehow focused there.
mhm,
And
mhm,
maybe it's like a conglomeration of many things. Maybe it's because it's such a weird place that maybe if the wind blows northwest and the waves are going this way or whatever, somehow it makes the geomagnetic storm
mhm.
more powerful or whatever it is, right? I don't think we're ever going to really know, but I'd be very curious to know how many things are down there. Like sunk things,
Mhm, mhm,
lost things,
mhm.
I should say.
Yeah,
Because like
that
we
was
spoke
another
about
thing that I had
igneous, but
thought about was, currents, natural
right,
currents of the water, wind currents, because we know how, like, the winds in Africa help grow the rainforests in South America. So, is there something similar like that? The Gulf Coast it's a janky area.
so
That
I have an example, actually just kind of dealing with that too.
okay.
Um, there was a scientist who put forward a theory that because of plate tectonics, like the plates move and all that stuff, and the
Mhm.
currents and everything, what's happening is a release of methane gas, which to me is a little bit strange because methane requires rotting material to be created.
Did you
Or
say rotting material?
yes, so like they're like for example they're actually putting pipes and stuff into pig pens and things and just collecting the methane, right? But what they did some experiments and they put like floating boats in water and everything and just released a bubble of methane.
Mm.
And because it's a different density, it's lighter than air. It's 0.6 times the specific gravity of air. So what had happened was the boats just ended up kind of like sinking, and then the water would obviously take in the place as the methane went, and it just kind of right down. So that was a
It would
scientific
sink the
experiment.
ship?
Yeah. So what would happen is, if it was in a perfect whatever place, the boat was in the right place, and the methane bubble was big enough, what happened was it would come around the ship, and then because of that, it's just a bubble, so the ship would sink because it's a bubble. Like just if you were whatever, to put a boat and then put a cup on top of it and push it down, the boat would still be there. But if you were to take away the cup really fast, the water kind of floods back in, and so the
Oh.
boat is lower because of the methane bubble. And then because methane floats, it's
Mhm.
gone, and then the water just kind of fills back in, right? So your ship is there 1 minute and sunk the next. There's no time to call in like emergencies or whatever. It's just the water's just taken over, you know. So
I could see that being, to see people who don't know that
yeah,
being a very supernatural
right.
kind of event to be seeing or a
Y-
part of.
Yeah, and again, for those who don't know, I work in the oil and gas industry, so I'm very familiar
Mhm,
with methane, which is CH4, which is natural gas.
mhm.
I'm very like I understand how it works, but I don't get how it would come from the bottom of the ocean. That doesn't, I haven't quite figured that out yet. But again, I'm not a geologist or whatever, seismologist or whoever the hell would look at what was inside the earth, right? So I don't really know.
I have a theory, if
Okay.
you'll indulge me. So you said it comes from rotting material?
Yes. Well,
What could
yeah.
be that big in the ocean
So I can explain that.
rotting?
Well, in the ocean, I can't explain, but it doesn't just necessarily mean like animals and things. It's also vegetation. So,
Well, and that's what I was just gonna say. There's all these legends and urban myths and
right.
stuff about creatures and things in the ocean. You know, what if something like Cthulhu was real? But what if he did and he's
Cthulhu's
just
real.
rotting down there and he's causing all kinds of
Right.
problems in Bermuda? His body farts are destroying ships.
I get exactly what you're saying. And to me, that would make sense for boats and things. But
Mhm,
again, like I don't know what's inside the Earth's core. Like
mhm,
maybe there is methane. I don't know. But what I do know is that there's something called electrolysis, which is something you get done to your skin as well. But basically, it's a running current through water, and that current can be used. It basically separates the hydrogen and the oxygen out of the water, so you can get hydrogen, you can get oxygen. Now, for those who are curious, Hawaii uses it to make synthetic natural gas. So my point being is, what if there is something under the water, and it's kind of like a release. Like Mel and I would know. I don't know who's watching or where they're watching from, but lots of oil refineries, you'll see them burning at night, like out of a huge stack, and that's
mhm,
because they're burning off excess. Um, it's basically a mess up. They're burning off the excess um, trash effectively,
mhm.
and what if something's under, say, a UFO base, for example, and that's just kind of like their, oh, we just need to release some whatever. It's just completely random. So I don't know.
Could also make sense. Lots of
Well,
interesting theories coming out of what's sinking boats and downing ships. But how would that down ships? Would methane be able to mess up ship or airplanes?
that's where I don't know. Now I know that um, the specifics of natural gas, they're similar to air.
Mhm.
Obviously not breathable. It is non-toxic, however, unless you get into sour gas. But that's a different story. I don't know how aircraft would react to a cloud of methane, like a methane release. I don't
Even if
know.
they would, it might not even have an impact on them.
Yeah, but and again, like I could see maybe old school planes because they use like carburetors and things, and there's like open
Mhm.
fire that sometimes came out of the old exhausts and stuff. I could see maybe like some kind of explosion or something, but it's
But you would find the pieces of an explosion.
exactly right, exactly. But even if it just blew up their engine or whatever, or it
Mhm,
ran rich or lean one of the other ways and it just stalled, you're
mhm,
still going to end up with that airplane in the water somewhere, right?
mhm.
So, and it's not going to hit the water softly, so it's not going to stay together.
No,
Yeah,
that's true. That
lots of
is
weird
true.
things.
Lots of strange little
I do
theories
for the
that we have.
record.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
about, Alex, do we think these strange happenings happening in this area? You said that they could be potentially an alien base. If
Mhm.
that's the case, do you think that that's something that humanity is in some way exploiting?
Um, where to walk? Do I want Men in Black at my front door? Yes. The answer is yes. If you're watching this, give me a shout. Um, I don't think so. I
Mhm.
am of the theory that the government knows what's going on, but the government, and I just mean governments in general, so whether it's the United States or Canada or whatever,
Mhm, mhm.
I think they know what's going on, but they can't control what's going on. It's basically like we're here,
Ah,
so fucking
much
mind
like the
your own business.
Sasquatch problem.
Well, I mean, I feel like Sasquatch is a lot nicer, but you know what I mean. But I think like when it comes to unidentified aerial phenomena, I think that the governments know, but they can't do anything about it. Or there was some sort of agreement made many moons ago, and they're too powerful for us to kind of like renege
Mm,
you
mhm.
know. So we don't know what's down there, and I feel like if there is something down there, why wouldn't they be able to exploit it? I don't think we could though. You know?
Mhm. I have to agree. I have to agree with that because,
Yeah.
like, if they were like, obviously something pretty powerful is going on down there. I mean, these ships and these airplanes, they cost a lot to
Yeah.
make and keep
Yeah.
up, and to have them just kind of suddenly yanked
Yeah.
and, like, taken away, it's gonna be a little frustrating.
I
So I
think
could
that's the
imagine that they would
scariest
be at the
part.
very least trying to figure out what's going on,
Yeah, I
but
think
I
that's the
equally
scariest
don't
part
think
though.
that they know how to handle it or how to
Right.
deal with it.
I think that's the scariest part is there's no SOSs. There's no, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? There's no flares. There's nothing. It's just they're there one minute and they're gone the next, you know? And that's
Which
the,
is also concerning. How many more, like, there's only someone, like, there's so many things that we can
yeah,
find on disappearances, things going missing, all that stuff in this area. How many more that we don't even know about?
that's the thing, right?
How
And
many
like
more before written history?
I made the cheeky comment about MH370 having disappeared. That's the thing is we don't know where that plane is, let alone every other plane that's ever been in the
Yeah.
Bermuda Triangle. I mean, MH370 was in a different ocean, but my point
Mhm.
being is we don't know where that one is, and that
Mhm.
one's massive. That's a huge plane.
Sure.
For those who don't know, I believe that was a Boeing 777. It was either that or an Airbus A380. One of the biggest.
It's a big boy.
They're the two biggest planes in the world.
Mhm.
Commercial planes, I should specify.
Mhm.
Passenger planes. Um, Although I think the Russians ended up blowing up the Antonov AN-225, so they might actually be the biggest plane left. So, anyways,
Yeah.
it's not it's not a small plane. It is not. So think about when we were kids, Mel, and we were flying whatever. I think the biggest plane around was like a 747,
Mhm.
and now we have the Airbus A380 and the Boeing 777, and they're just like the wingspan alone is just mind blasting. How it takes off from the ground, I don't know, magic.
Science.
So it's something really really big to disappear,
Mhm.
just like a ship. I could get it if it's a canoe or like a yacht, but I don't know.
Mhm.
It's bizarre.
It is. And, like, again, as I mentioned, how many of yachts, passenger
Hmm.
planes, little things
Exactly.
that were just
The
not
little
as
things.
important to
That's
record
right.
or
The little
report,
things. Yeah.
how many of those have disappeared also?
Yeah. I'd be
And
kind of
I've
curious.
been watching shows too, back in the day where it's like they came across wreckage as they were exploring, and they get the numbers and they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
They don't know where the plane was or where it was registered to. They can't find anything, which
Yeah.
makes it even more suspicious.
Here's the other
How do you
suspicious
get
thing.
an airplane in the sky, particularly in the sky and in the ocean,
Yeah.
and you not have record of it existing?
So
That's
here's the other
suspicious.
creepy thing is when they do find some wreckage. For example, they said that they found the wing or a portion of the wing of MH370, for example.
Mm,
All the serial numbers were gone off of that plane, off of that portion of the wing, which doesn't make sense in my brain because there's more than one serial number on every single plane. Like
and
every
they would
part
have to
has a
know where
serial
those
number.
serial
You know
numbers
what I
are.
mean? where did the serial number go? It didn't just fall off, because if that one fell off, there's one right like 4 inches to the right. You know what I mean? They're all gone. So
Don't be
I'd be
suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
suspicious. I'd be very curious to know if maybe somewhere around the world that's like not really reported, if they're finding things. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we just found this fucking ghost ship. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be very curious to know, like that. You know what I mean? I doubt it, but
I mean, on the African coast, aren't there several areas where you can find just the bones and remains of ships that have run aground and just
yeah,
washed up?
but they also bust ships there. So when companies are done with cruise ships, for example, they'll sell it, and what they do is they bring it to, I don't remember which country in Africa, but they'll run it aground, and then they'll just strip it from all the metal parts and stuff, and they'll do
I
whatever they
think
do
they
with
did
metal.
that
So
in Italy also, near where
yes,
I stayed
yeah,
when I went there in Poveglia.
ship breakers are pretty interesting. But yeah, it's the whole ship, and it's just one guy just basically sails it into the coast, and it grounds itself, and then they just get to
Oh,
work chopping her down. Yeah. So
well,
you'll find a whole bunch of weird things, but there's lots of bizarre stuff, like boats in the middle of the ocean or in the middle of the desert and stuff like that. It's very bizarre.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Well, they also just found,
mysteries for another time.
a few years ago, they found a blue whale, or I think it was a blue whale, maybe a sperm whale, whatever it was, in the middle of the jungle. Like, how does that happen? Maybe it's the reverse. You know what I mean? It's taken from the ocean and sending it somewhere else. But I'll
That
send
does
you.
seem odd. Was it like a live one or was it the
It was
bones?
dead. It was dead, but they found it. It's like recently
Fleshy?
passed. Yeah, fleshy. I'll send you the link. It's pretty interesting.
That does sound pretty interesting. But otherwise, it sounds like we have kind of come to the end of our discussion here. Alex, did you want to add anything else about the Bermuda Triangle real quick before we get out of here?
Don't go there. Just
We'll have another video.
we should leave Florida, and then we'll just annex Florida to, like, I don't know, somewhere else.
Disney
And then
World.
we'll just get rid of all of the coast of everything. We'll be safe. We'll just deal with our big foots, and the incoming alien apocalypse that is going to happen soon.
Save
But
yourselves.
if we don't go into the ocean, we don't have to worry about the Bermuda Triangle. Just saying.
There you go. There you go.
Plus sharks. Come on, guys. Get us swim.
Yeah, I am not a fan of being eaten by sharks. That's
No
just,
thanks.
especially along that coast. There's too many bull sharks. Well, that being said, you can catch a Melball during the week on Andre and Melball's Wrestling Talks YouTube channel, where we drop 2 to 3 videos a week on NJPW and Stardom Wrestling. You can also catch me on Astro Pizzoro's YouTube channel, where we do our show Ladies Wrestling Showcase, where we talk all things women's professional wrestling. You can follow a Melball. She got a link tree.
Yay!
She got a link tree, so Alex doesn't have to do so much work in his post. It is Linktree, so linktr.ee/Melball Collins, and that's where you can find all of my socials, all of my stuff, everything that I'm doing for this amazing work thing online. Alex, you have significantly less stuff than I do, but where can the people find you and all the things that you were doing this week?
I'm Wait Cannon on YouTube. I'm also Werewolf with the Movies on YouTube. Wait for it.
Ooh, got the big deco.
That's right. But yeah, I haven't been posting much there. I got a bunch of work stuff going on, so been pretty occupied. So.
And that being said, until we see you next time, I am your Melball. Over there is a werewolf. We will see you next time. Keep her spooky.